I want to create a planet in Photoshop using this shot that was taken out of an airplane window. Then we'll use another shot taken out of an airplane window and make it look like the planet is in that scene. Now, if I were to go back to this texture and immediately go to a 3D sphere, which is one of the built-in shapes Photoshop can create, there will be a seam, so I'll show you that first. 3D, new mesh from layer, mesh preset, and you could build a cone, a cube, a pyramid, a ring, a soda can, a wine bottle, but I'm going to select sphere. And when I do, it brought up the 3D panel, and I want to make sure on the Move tool I'm on Rotate the 3D object. And if I turn it to the opposite side, there you could see the seam I was referring to. On the other sides, it's not too bad, but you can prevent that seam, and I'll step backward. So Command-Option-Z on the Mac or Control-Alt-Z on Windows will go back several steps. Standard procedure before you wrap something around an object is usually to take half the width and half the height and offset it to see the seams, then remove them. So under the Filter menu, I'm going to choose Other and Offset. They use this a lot to create web backgrounds as well. And the width and height of this pattern is 1000 by 1000. So I'll offset 500 by 500. And when I click OK, there is the pretty obvious seam I was referring to. If you use the Patch tool, Spot Healing Brush is nice for this as well, but I like the patch because it allows me to choose what I'm using to remove the seam. So with the Patch tool, I can make a selection directly in the center where I see the most obvious seam and drag to other areas. And you can keep dragging over and over again, and it will keep blending. And this area is a little bit trickier, but anywhere I see a seam, I'm just making a selection, getting in the middle of the selection, and moving to another spot. And I think that's not too bad. So now we will do 3D, new mesh from layer, mesh preset, and sphere. And there we have it. And I'm still on my Move tool and still on Rotate the 3D object, so I could see different surfaces, top, bottom, left, and right. I could select the infinite light source and move it to another direction if this is what I really want to focus on showing. And this little heads-up display is very helpful for letting me see different portions of the sphere. So top, right, left, bottom, back, front. But I'm just going to pull it into view. And to get back to the sphere, I'll click on Sphere, and I can keep rotating or moving in different directions. It's also helpful to use the little arrows that allow you to line up or rotate different portions. There we go. It wiggles pretty fast, so you got to hold on tight. All right, I think I'm happy with that, and you could place this in any direction you would like. So once this is created, I do have a material that is the sphere. So if I double-click on Sphere Material, it's automatically being applied, but I can play with things like shine. And you usually have to go pretty far before and after to see a difference. Reflection, there I'm getting some real light. Roughness. And bump isn't going to show too much. Typically there's a bump map created to give texture to the surface, but we're just focusing on creating simple 3D shapes. So I'm going to double-click on the word background and name the sphere. And then I will right-click and duplicate the layer. And when I duplicate the layer, I'm going to put it in the sky photo and click OK. So if I go to the sky, there is my sphere over top of my interesting airplane shot. So I could again move these. I could collapse the 3D and close this heads-up display or this view if I don't want to see it any longer. And if I click on the background layer, it gets out of 3D editing mode. If I click back on the sphere, it goes back into 3D editing mode. And if I go to View, Show, you could turn on and off different portions of the 3D. Like maybe I don't want to see the ultraviolet overlay, which is that little square, or some of the planes can be distracting. And I can still continue to turn this and move this in different directions until I'm happy with it. I could also go to my 3D panel and make adjustments to the material. So maybe I want to make this a little bit darker. So if I select the sphere material, here in Filter by Materials, I can go to the Properties panel. And on the Properties panel, I am working with the texture that was converted originally. You could choose from built-in textures if you want a different look and feel. But that's going to go back to a solid. So if I scroll back up and click away and undo with Command Z, or edit step backward to undo twice, it will bring me back to my surface. Now, I actually want to change the look and feel of the texture, so I'm going to choose Edit Texture. And with this Edit Texture, you see the place where I removed the scene. I'm actually going to add an adjustment layer to make it fit into the background a little bit better. So I will choose from the bottom of my Layers panel a Levels adjustment. And I'll make it a bit darker. When I close this, it's actually opened the embedded pattern that I started with. When I close it and save, it impacted the 3D object, and now that's applied. When you're all finished with this, you do need to do a ray tracing of the object. Ray tracing is committing to your 3D properties. So if I go back to my 3D panel and select my 3D object and go back to Environment, the whole scene, at the bottom, you'll see Render. And now in Photoshop CC, the Ray Trace progress bar actually shows more detail. Both time and percentage are shown. So I am ready to commit to this. I will click Render. And it's going to the scene. And you could see the render progress. There's a progress bar and the time remaining. 1 minute. I will pause the recording and come back when it's finished. And the rendering is finished. And I can click on background to see our completed 3D shape. So I hope you have fun experimenting with all the cool scenes you can create by building 3D objects from some of the built-in 3D meshes in Photoshop.